This week, Emmet and I discuss a team-up between the Dark Knight and the Nightmare Investigator. Batman meets Italy's humorous horror icon Dylan Dog in a beautiful 3-issue series originally published in Italian and recently released in English from DC. We could recommend it on the art alone, but the story gives us a lot to discuss as well, including very rich conversations between characters and an interesting take on the Caped Crusader. As always, a reminder that you can support the podcast by pledging a few bucks a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. At $4 a month, you can hear our monthly podcast on Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel run. Or if you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim.
This is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo and Emmet in country Victoria, Australia. How are you?
I'm very well, Tim. Thanks for having me again.
I finally kind of put my finger on why I always stumble over introducing you, because to me, country Victoria sounds weird. We wouldn't say it that way in America. I think what you just mean is it's in the... Australia has states, is that right?
States, yes.
States, yeah. So it's in the state of Victoria, but it's not in a town, right? It's
correct
in the countryside.
It's rural.
So yeah, I might say rural Victoria. It's hard to say, or just in the state of Victoria, or something like that.
There's an added dimension to it as well, because in Australia you've got the indigenous concept of country. Which is a sort of place of belonging as well. And I'm not going to claim that because I am a white person, but it's something that, it's good to acknowledge as well. So.
Right. Well, when you say country Victoria, it does make me think nation. But that was kind of part of the confusion. But eventually I figured it out, and yet I still stumble over it because it just sounds a little weird to me. I'm like, am I saying this right? Anyway, so... unusually for this podcast, we're talking about a current mainstream book this time. It's not a current indie book. It's not an old mainstream book. Although I also kind of question calling DC and Marvel mainstream anymore, because I think there are other comics, like YA comics, that sell better than Marvel and DC these days. But anyway, this is Batman Dylan Dog. Now, I'd never heard of Dylan Dog. Were you familiar with this character already?
Was I familiar with him? Tim, okay. I am ready to go on this one.
All right.
But we should also say that this is, while technically a DC comic, because it features Batman, it is, in fact, the Sergio Bonale Editore comic. So this is Fumetti. This was originally published in Italian.
And this is owned by the publisher?
Well, it's a collaboration, but Dylan Dog is...
But I mean, the character, yeah, it's not owned by the creator, it's owned by the company, just like Batman is owned by DC.
So here is my copy of the Dylan Dog case files, which you can see is quite large. And this was... republished by Dark Horse in a couple of years ago now. So this is very precious to me. I keep this very close.
Well, I guess that was like 1999, right? The Dark Horse was publishing it.
Yeah, they were doing a sort of raid on European characters. DC also had the Humanoids imprint there for a while. So you had this flush period of sort of the cream of the European crop being republished in English in America. So, it was a great time for me. Anyway, Dylan Dog is a nightmare investigator, which essentially means he lazes around all day and plays his music and flirts with women and hangs out with his best friend Groucho Marx, who is actually Groucho Marx.
Well, I guess what I looked up was he's a Groucho Marx impersonator whose character became his permanent personality. That's what Wikipedia says. So he's not like the real Groucho, right? He's somebody who just looks and acts like Groucho.
He's Groucho. I mean, what are you going to do? And Dylan keeps finding himself in these weird situations, and they tend to involve either magic or issues with time. And the series itself, at least the ones that I've read, are flagrantly cinematic. And I don't just mean that in terms of the staging and the visual sense of it. I mean, they keep lifting from movies. And one of the ways this is most pronounced is the fact that the main character, Dylan Dog, is himself a reference to a young Rupert Everett in the 1980s. Okay. Rupert Everett was in a cowboy movie that the artists saw and then decided to, okay, we'll take his look. And then years later, Michele Soavi made Della Morte dell'Amore, which is in America known as Cemetery Man. And that is like an earlier version of the Dylan Dog concept. I think it's based on a novel. And Rupert Everett played the character. So it came like full circle. And that was my introduction to Dylan Dog. Was the movie Cemetery Man, which I love. But a guy who works in a cemetery defending the town from zombies that come to life every night. That's the premise. It's great. So it's this really sort of popular Italian fumetti comic. Lots of fans love his look, his appearance, his manner, and this sort of the horror gore aspects of it. Again, are so indebted to trash cinema and horror cinema and exploitation cinema. It lends it almost a sort of charm because it's on the comic book page, and this sort of these sort of kinetic images are now static images. So there's something really, I don't know, fascinating about Dylan Dog. There was an American movie with Brandon Routh that came out a few years ago that was awful. 2011. Do not watch that.
Yeah, Wikipedia said it bombed and the critics hated it.
Yeah, it's really bad. However, I saw that this comic had come out, and my immediate thought was, "Oh God, this is going to be some cash-in." I didn't realize this was actually an Italian comic. That was licensing the use of Batman and other characters from DC in a Dylan Dog story.
Yeah. Now, what confused me was I couldn't find a translator credit anywhere. If this was originally done in Italian, and I thought the English was very well done, but I was like, who did the translation? I mean, if this were a manga, there'd always be a translator name in there, but...
Maybe Recchioni did it himself. Roberto Recchioni is credited for story and script. He might have just redone it. He could have been like, was it Uderzo from the Asterix comics? Or it might be the other fellow from Asterix, who's multilingual, and he would just write the scripts to fit the culture.
Okay. Yeah, maybe so. Yeah. Okay.
We don't know. I couldn't. I haven't researched that, so I can't speak to that. But this was published in Italian, and I went onto Reddit and I was looking up to see what people were saying about it. And I saw like American Batman fans like asking, "Oh, is this comic any good?" And the Italians were like, "It's okay." It just gives you a sense of the sort of scale of values, you know, because this has gone down a treat with the people I know who've read it. Like, they love it. And I was speaking to the owner of All Star Comics, Troy, in Melbourne, and I was asking about how it went, how the book's being received, and he was saying that kids who come in and just buy their comics had sort of out of curiosity picked this up off the shelf. It was a very nice price for the amount of content you got in it. So
yeah, they're pretty thick books.
It was a great value buy. And then they would come in the following day and say, "Give me everything you have in Dylan Dog." And I was like, what an amazing introduction. What an amazing introduction. I took the long road to get to Dylan. You know, I watched that movie. I had to find translations because I don't speak Italian. And much to my mother's chagrin, my mother does speak Italian. You know, I was like, oh, I had to go through all this effort. And these kids, they just picked up a Batman book.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that in Italy, maybe this was published all in one volume, or do you know?
I was under the understanding that this is why they're so thick. I think they're albums. I think there were three. I think it was still
Right.
three.
Well, and there was a 0 issue. And the prologue in this, I think, is the 0 issue.
Got it.
Because
Okay,
the first volume is thicker than the other two. It's 86 pages, and the others are like 66.
Well, there is some filler in the first issue. The sequence on Inverness is actually from the very first Dylan Dog story. So I suspect everything up until the end of the flashback in Inverness might belong to that 0
Inverness.
issue.
I'm sorry, I'm not policing what you're talking about.
Inverness is a place in Scotland. That is where Zavras
All right, so when they're
was-
on the tables and Dr. What's his name? Xanax. No, not Xanax.
Zavras. Yeah, Zavras, yeah.
Zavras. Okay.
He was-
I'm wondering,
that's-
was that in the 0 issue too, maybe?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's what
okay,
I'm saying. Because it's perfect filler, you know, and it's a episode from really early on in Dylan Dog, and it keeps coming back because Zavras keeps coming back, you know.
Yeah, well, it's useful to know about that episode. We just see kind of the end of it, you know, the wrap up of that story. But yeah, it plays right into the actual 3-issue story. So
In a really inventive way, like connecting Dylan Dog's arch nemesis, maybe also his father, to Batman's arch nemesis, at an important juncture in both their lives is a nice touch. I thought that was a nice piece of adaptation in terms of fusing these two stories together. And I was just laughing a moment ago when I made that joke about Zavras being Dylan's dad, potentially his dad, because didn't the new Joker movie obliquely hint that maybe Joker is a Wayne bastard as well? I don't know. I just put that out there.
a few other things in my notes from the research that I did. I guess the original creator was Tiziano Sclavi. And the character of Dylan Dog is named for Dylan Thomas and for Mickey Spillane's 1972 book Erection Set, called in Italian Dog Figlio di, which means dog son of ... Is that kind of like saying son of a ... like that? Yeah, okay. But yeah, Erection Set in English. But I thought this book was really well done for like filling in details about both Batman and Dylan Dog and things that the fans would say, yep, that fits. And like with Dylan Dog, I guess, and I was finding a lot of things in the book that were mentioned on Wikipedia about the character, like that he gets motion sickness in an airplane and things like that. And talking about Groucho making dumb jokes and irritating both Dylan and his client.
And also Dylan and Selena Kyle having a fling. Which
right. I guess he usually sleeps with his female clients, and I guess they're mostly female.
And that actually makes perfect sense in character for both of those characters. And also it sort of creates that, again, that sort of crossover effect. And it seems very natural, you know. It's not Punisher turning up at Riverdale to hunt down Archie, you know. It's not
Jam that round peg into the square hole.
Yeah, folks. That's an actual comic. Go look it up.
Yes.
So it's a natural flow, and I think the way I credit to the adaptation, the process of adaptation here, because they've sort of married these two universes quite well. To the point where when we get to issue 2 and we start meeting other DC characters such as John Constantine, there is this sense of, I'm sorry to everybody, it's Constantine. It's Constantine.
Yeah, we're in a British environment here. I think we have to say Constantine.
When we meet Constantine, there is even that idea of, wait, you do what I do. Like, basically the same character. You know, you're just more dissolute than I am and drunk. because Dylan is more sort of louche and stylish and casual, and Constantine is harsh and possibly out of his mind.
I also noticed that, like, practically every time any character speaks, it's a character moment. I mean, I feel like the characters and the conversations are kind of more important than the story in this book. Because, like, every conversation reveals something about the characters and even plays into some themes. I was noticing that there's a theme of what is a monster. It comes up several times through the series. Like, early on, so Joker is remembering when he met Dr. Zabaras before, and Joker thought he was a monster, and Zabaras is saying the monster comes from the Latin word monstrum, which in ancient times referred to a marvel, a wonder, and he's saying that you should enjoy the fact that you're a monster, basically. And later, Killer Croc is involved, and when Batman asks him why he keeps doing this, even though Batman always beats him, Croc says, "Because I'm a monster and I do what monsters do." And monsters come up again later. It's this kind of theme running through the whole series.
Yeah, it's really well done. And again, the idea that Zabaras would almost give Joker inspiration in that way. That's what I mean by flow. It just sort of, it's really natural.
Buck up, friend. You're a monster.
Yeah, you're a marvel. You're a marvel. You know, I just saw Furiosa in the cinema, the follow-up to Fury Road, and there's a moment where a character sees Furiosa, and she's been through the ringer. She's really hurt. She's now got her prosthetic arm that we saw in Fury Road. So I'm not spoiling anything here. This is the lead up to that character, how that character looks in that movie, and the person who sees her says, "Oh, you look at you. You're delightful. You've become something more." And that's that same idea that things that you would see as being wounds or disfigurement or these kinds of characters like Zabaras go, "Oh no, that makes you interesting." now you've got a story to tell, which is sort of this idea of these monsters looking for their purpose is another theme, because that's the issue with Killix. Killix is trying to rediscover why doesn't killing work for him anymore? Why can't he still have that passion from it? And he the whole climax of this series, I think I've read some critiques of it saying, "Oh, this doesn't really go anywhere. It just sort of falls over." But I thought again, it was sort of building on that theme of resolving this sort of issue. And Dylan is interesting because Dylan doesn't look for meaning. He talks. He's like a Dirk Gently holistic detective. He's sort of just things just happen to him, but he's open to that. He's like saying, "Oh yeah, well, I'm just going to get a slice of pizza and see what happens." And
he orders pizza a couple of times in the series.
It's almost like all these characters in his life that are evil because they are desperate for meaning in a meaningless world, and Dylan embraces it. Dylan's like, "No. There is no meaning. There's nothing. There's no point to any of it. Let's just roll with it and see what happens."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in that same vein, in the monsters thing again, later on, they've captured this murderer, Christopher Killix, that Joker brought back to life, and they're trying to decide what to do with him. But Batman first says they should put him in Arkham, and Dylan says Killix isn't a common murderer. As the Joker said, he's a true monster. I mean, even the Joker thinks that Killix is a monster. Batman says monsters don't exist. They're just people who have had a bad day.
Which is a Batman line. That is One More Day. That is the Alan Moore script. Coming in. They've gotten so much mileage out of these characters. I really love, as you said, it's just every moment is a rich moment. And you just said, "Oh, Joker brings Killix back to life." He brings him back from hell. which means, we get to visit the sort of Vertigo hell as well. There's sort of the blend of DC Universe and Vertigo Sandman Universe hell happening here too, which is, again, and that's because John Constantine's involved, so you need to actually touch
Constantine.
Constantine.
You've been out of the UK too long, or out of Ireland too long.
Well, okay, I was in the UK for a year.
I've been out of the British Isles for too long.
Sure. Yes, it's Constantine. So I mean, that second issue, I love the. We haven't talked about the art. The art is incredible.
Yeah.
So much of the color is amazing, but the hell sequence is just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like similar to the writing. It's very colorful and still retains the requisite darkness. It looks like a Batman book. There's a lot of darkness, dark alleys in Gotham and so forth. But at the same time, there's so much color in it. And you were talking about going to hell. At the end, we also go to heaven. And I was so happy because I love Art Nouveau. And there was all this Art Nouveau style and so much light and color. And yeah, that was great.
Yeah. It's just, that was beautiful. That was a beautiful idea at the end there. It's nice. This is what I mean. Like, I know that folks reading this are looking for like a big violent drag out fight, and instead it's just this lovely ironic slash of, oh, this is hell. I love that so much. Yeah, we get to meet Etrigan, and the rhyming speech actually works.
Yeah, so that surprised me because I'd only read the original Kirby Demon, and I don't think Etrigan's dialogue rhymed in that.
I think, I could be wrong, but I think that's a more Gaiman introduction.
Okay.
So I believe around Swamp Thing, Sandman, we start getting the idea of the various demons, and higher you are, the requirement to rhyme comes in. Because it's almost like a play on Paradise Lost, where Lucifer is telling the whole thing in verse. So I wonder if that's the joke. But yeah, the English-speaking writers who then get landed with this character after the Vertigo era and want to use Etrigan. It's similar to the problem certain writers have with Hank McCoy, the Beast, in Marvel Comics, and they want him to sound intelligent. I've given this rant before, but then they it's like they've got an encyclopedia beside them, and they start like looking at references to things, and then they just drop that into dialogue. It isn't natural, and it doesn't sound right, and it's not smart. It's just what a dumb person thinks a smart person sounds like. And with the devils as well, when they're rhyming, sometimes the rhymes are just lousy rhymes. They're just really bad. So again, I'd be interested to see any issue with with this translation, because that's doubly difficult. You're not only translating the language, you have to recreate the rhyming scheme in another language.
Yeah, it sounds like they've made him into a particularly hard character to write, like the Riddler. You mean, if you write the Riddler, you have to write good riddles.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just lame.
Yeah.
Coming up, an amazing Batman bit we haven't seen before, how Batman is utilized in the inventive Dylan Dog universe, and more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon, and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
Do you like comics? The 1960s? How about middle-aged gay couples gossiping about their neighbors? Then you'll love Checkered Past.
A loving examination of DC's Go-Go Check branded comic magazines published from February 1966 to August 1967.
I'm Dr. Bob.
And I'm Dr. Husband.
And each week we'll be your hosts on a trippy tour through mid-century four-color madness. Checkered Past. Available wherever fine podcasts are downloaded for free.
And the second issue just had all these lovely little touches of classic myth as well. So we have the old spirits being resurrected, but also myth of these two characters. So one moment that I absolutely was knocked out by was the visit to the medium. And that moment between the medium and Batman.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before. I've never seen somebody do that before, and I thought it was extraordinary character beat.
Explain what it is.
Well, I don't know. Do I want to spoil it for anybody? Okay. I think it's worth mentioning because it's tantalizing. So they go to see Dylan and Batman go to see a medium.
Yeah, Madame Trelkovsky.
Yes, and they're trying to find access to hell for Killick. This is before they go to John Constantine. Constantine's the last resort. Yeah. You don't want to go to Constantine. So they're doing the rounds and they visit this medium. And I presume she's a Dylan Dog character. I don't recall her offhand. Dylan's adventures take place in London, and it's a very sort of, again, cinematic London, sort of preserved in amber from the 1970s. But yes, they visit the medium, and she's not able to help them, and they're heading out the door. And then she turns to Batman as he's leaving, and she says, "Come back and see me if ever you're in town again. I met your parents a few days ago, and they're very proud of you." And we just see Batman from behind, and this moment of like shock.
Yeah, his word balloon just has a question mark and an exclamation point in it.
Yes, and it's a lovely beat. It's a great beat, and he's completely, the fact that he has friends who go back and forth from hell. He could have talked to his parents at any time. Well, not hell necessarily, the afterlife, but in this universe, you can do that. Hopefully heaven. You can do that. You can speak to the dead. And I don't know if this has ever been done before in the DC comics, but it's a nice little beat here that, they are looking at him. They are watching him from beyond. And now he knows that. And he's possibly a little disturbed by it. But it's just a beautiful beat.
Yeah, that was great. I happened to see on some message board somewhere, it might have been Reddit, where somebody was complaining about some of Batman's dialogue, where he says, good guys don't use guns. And I guess they didn't think that Batman would use the term good guy. I'm not sure. I mean, my Batman is Adam West, so I really don't have a handle on current Batman characterization exactly. What did you think of that?
It doesn't strike me as beyond the pale. It could be a translation issue, but I think that speaks to the sort of expectation that Batman is this dark knight of vengeance. He talks like this and he takes himself very seriously. It's, which I just see it as an expression that a person might use. And, somewhere between your Batman 66 and your Christopher Nolan Batman, you've got a guy who talks to people and has conversations and is familiar with certain uses of phrases like good guys and bad guys.
Yeah. Well, and I don't read current Batman comics generally, and I'm not sure if this is unusual, but I felt like the treatment of Batman was occasionally almost like Lego Batman, where it's kind of making fun of the gruffness of the modern take on the character. An example is when Batman and Dylan are in the Batmobile, and Dylan says, "Can you at least tell me where we're going, Batman?" He says, "Somewhere safe." "Are you always this generous when sharing details?" And Batman says, "For you, Dylan Dog, I'm making an exception." It's not clear to me if Batman realizes that he's being funny or if it's accidentally being funny. He's sincerely making an exception. I'm not sure how to interpret that, but it is humorous.
I know a lot of writers have poked fun at Batman's stoic seriousness, and even one of the more recent writers like Tom King, he had a sequence in a comic which got memed a lot, and a lot of people were sort of calling attention to it as like whether the joke worked or not. Where the Bat family go to a diner and they sit down for burgers, and then Batman takes out a knife and fork and starts carving up his burger with his knife and fork. And, you know, again, the joke being he's so out of touch, he won't just pick up the burger, you know? So it's not, I don't think that's unusual. I think that's a standard sort of poking fun at the Bat God idea. And, you know, but I also think it's worth poking fun because then you get people like this who go on message boards and complain that he's not being taken seriously. Plus, he's in a Dylan Dog comic, so no, things are not going to get taken seriously. Yeah, it's a very silly book that happens to have moments of graphic horror, and then it resets to silly again. His best friend is Groucho.
Right. I mean, come on, Groucho.
Yeah. Groucho's right there, people. But yeah, I really think that this version of Batman worked for me because I thought he was actually very respectful. It was a very respectful version of Batman, and the gothic sense of Batman's universe sort of just intermingling with Dylan Dog's universe. They complemented each other really well. So it sort of really played for me. My only issue is, and I think again this is something I've seen before, which is the insistence of Batman believing in a fixed reality. So he makes fun of, oh, there's no such thing as ghosts, or whatever. He makes a reference to there's no such thing as ghosts, there's no such thing as, you know, zombies, or which is absurd in the Batman universe because he's and then within this universe itself,
but isn't there a point where Dylan is surprised? I mean, that Batman does believe in ghosts, and Batman says, "I know a ghost."
Yeah,
I think he's talking about
third issue.
Dead Man.
Yes, he talks about Dead Man. Yeah. So it's confusing. I wonder if somebody had a word or something. I'm not sure. There was this moment of there's no such thing as there was some monster that was mentioned, and there's no such thing as that. And it's like, it's the DC universe. Everything's been done. The Creature Commandos are getting a movie soon. Like,
right. I mean, DC and Marvel both. Nobody has an excuse to not believe in anything supernatural because it all exists there.
But yes, I've seen other writers do. I think was it Fortunate Son was the infamous Batman story where he's not familiar with rock and roll music. Like,
he's not a time traveler.
He's for a lot of people, Batman represents a period in their life. I mean, Frank Miller talked about this in his prologue to The Dark Knight Returns. So there is that sense of he's sort of frozen in time for them, and he represents certain cultural values for them when they were kids. So him moving forward in time, I think, creates problems for certain writers who get control of the character, and then they try and talk about that through the comic book. And the thing about Batman is he's a very theatrical, circus act-esque figure. I mean, a lot of superheroes have that sort of acrobat aesthetic built into them, the whole idea of the cape and the long johns and the top of the crest on it. It comes back to that tradition, but you also need to balance that in the contemporary world. And Batman, out of all the characters, despite his sort of old world money and gothic look, he needs to be contemporary. He has to be. Like that, that you need to walk that line very carefully. And as much as this is not an official DC comic, I think the folks here nailed it. And one of the ways they did that was in, again, the contrast with Dylan. Because Dylan can be out of time. That's his whole deal. Like, we're not even sure what Dylan is. Like, he's some strange creature who sort of walks between life and death, and he exists in this dream space. Like that's how his stories work. So Batman actually intruding upon Dylan Dog's London is a good idea, because then you don't need to be so concerned with how modern Batman is being. Dylan's out of time. His London is out of time.
Yeah, because in the first issue, Bruce does go to London, and I think they're still there in issue 2, aren't they? Eventually, they do get back to Gotham, but yeah, I mean, he kind of sets up a Batcave in a castle, right, in the UK, and Alfred's perfectly happy to stay there in a castle in his home country.
Yeah. Another, I mentioned that the Dylan Dog stories often lift from cinema and movies. One in particular, I really want to shout out is there was a storyline of Dylan Dogs, and the entire basis of it is a riff on Andrei Tartakovsky's Stalker. Which is based on Roadside Picnic, the Strugatsky brothers novel. And it was one of my favorite issues of the Dylan Dog story. And one of the reasons why is because they take this horrific stalker world where these characters have to walk across a blasted landscape with weird radiation. It causes strange effects, and you never know when they're going to impact on you, how they're going to impact on you. And they locate it within a London alleyway. So characters that go into a particular alley get transported to this stalker landscape. But the inciting moment is there's an alley in London and it sends you to this place. And I think that's gorgeous. I think that's just a really gorgeous idea. Screw you, Harry Potter. Was it platform 10.5 or whatever it is? No, it's the inventiveness of the Dylan Dog universe just really appeals to me, and yeah, it was just a joy seeing them play with Batman's toys in that universe.
By the way, so you have the Dark Horse edition of this, right? So yeah. I read that they changed Groucho's name to Felix in there and got rid of his mustache because they didn't want a lawsuit.
They didn't want the lawsuit. And that's, again, why this is an Italian book, because I think that was less of an issue in Italy. So it was originally published in Italian and published there. And then they just got it translated for the licensed English language version. And I found it interesting that Groucho was still Groucho.
Yeah, in this, he is not Felix. He does have a mustache. So... Yeah, I guess maybe 25 years have passed since the Dark Horse one, right? So maybe they decided it's not going to be as much of an issue now.
Well, I mean, my thought was, is it because it hasn't been originally published in the US? But that doesn't make sense for the reprint. Well, yeah, you're right.
I mean, yeah, they're both originally published in Italy.
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
So I liked how at the ending, Dylan kind of makes a reference to the fact that this was a crossover, and he's saying this. I'm not sure this actually happened, and it's going to be forgotten when I wake up. It's the nature of crossovers, right? Superman and Spider-Man meet, and then it's never mentioned again.
No one mentions that again. No one remembers that.
No.
So he's absolutely right.
Yeah, and Spider-Man never says, my friend Superman, maybe I should call him up.
Yeah.
Nothing.
No, he's got his friend Hyperion, who's the sort of the counterpart, Marvel counterpart of Superman. Yes, did you like that he writes with a quill?
Yeah.
He writes with a feathered quill. But that's what I was talking about before. He exists in this sort of unreal space. So even the fact this adventure he's just been on, it's like, it's probably a dream. I'll wake up in the morning and won't have remembered it. And
Bad who?
That's just his life. Yeah, that's just how he lives. That's just Dylan's whole deal. And that's why I embrace the Dylan Dog philosophy in life. It's like, roll with the punches, see what happens. Yeah, there's a lovely note to end on as well. And you're right. It's a great sort of tease of the nature of crossovers. And yeah, all around is a great package, even down to the ending of this story featuring Dylan Dog being slightly anticlimactic. They usually are. There's usually sort of just like a falling off. And again, I love that because that's it's very oblique and it leaves you hanging. You're what's going to happen next? But I can appreciate that some Western readers would be going, wait, no. But folks, you're getting 3 issues of, was it close to 80 pages? Something like that?
Yeah.
For like $4. This is crazy, crazy good value. Gorgeous art. And as Tim, as you mentioned, that art nouveau? Is that
Art Nouveau? Yes.
Yeah. The cover art, the Art Nouveau cover art as well, just on the shelf. It was such a beautiful cover. But the sequence itself is stunning.
Yeah. I mean, I've always been kind of attracted to Art Nouveau ever since, I think, when I was a kid, I had like 1 or 2 of the Oz books that had Art Nouveau covers. And 5 years ago here in Tokyo, I went to an exhibit of Alphonse Mucha's Art Nouveau stuff from the beginning of the 20th century. And yeah, it was fantastic.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, it's such a... I love when various artists get to play in that space. We interviewed J.H. Williams III on Promethea a few years ago here, myself and Kumar, and that's something he just pulled off with a plum. I'm just going to do some Art Nouveau here. So it's always fun to see it used in a creative way.
Mm-hmm. Do you have anything else you need to say?
No, I think I'd be unnecessarily underlining the points we have already made. Sorry, one last thing. I just wanted to mention as well, in relation to these particular issues that I bought off the shelf, which is unusual for us, Tim, because typically we're either reading collected volumes or digital edition, right? Mm-hmm. But this particular issue featured a tribute to Ramona Fradden.
Ah, yeah.
And I just wanted to pause and mention her passing. She, incredibly important artist, somebody who got out of the industry at the right time for her and made a career out of doing her newspaper comic strip, which, you look, a happy ending for a comic creator for me is they don't get burnt out. That's a happy ending,
And they have health insurance.
Yes.
Or they don't get seriously ill with no health insurance.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a book, sort of book on Fradden that came out a couple of years ago, sort of just an overview of her career. Well worth getting if you get the chance to track it down. So this is a wonderful interview with between Ramona Fradden and Howard Chaykin.
Wow.
And that's in The Art of Ramona Fradden from, I think it's Dynamite Entertainment published it. But yeah, well worth checking out. She had a really storied career, and I just thought it was a nice little tribute. I don't like that we celebrate these creators when they die. It'd be good if we celebrate them while they're still here.
Well, that goes for anybody, I think.
Yeah, but all the same, I thought it was a lovely tribute, and given that I was all wrapped up in my feelings reading a Dylan Dog comic and my nostalgia for Dylan Dog, then encountering this little tribute just is a sweet little button for me, So I just wanted to shout that out.
Batman Dylan Dog is published in English by DC. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Every 4 weeks, we drop another episode of Starlin Kills Captain Marvel, discussing all of Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel work. It's available to patrons contributing at least $4 a month. It's less than you'd spend on a trip to Starbucks. How about cutting back on your caffeine intake and instead hear some stimulating conversations about Captain Marvel and Thanos? At deconstructingcomics.com, you can connect to us on X, Facebook, or YouTube, follow the link to shop at Amazon to support the show, and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode on our site or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And now you can also send us a voicemail. Find the Leave a Voicemail link on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Next time, a review of Sammy Harkham's Blood of the Virgin, a comic that involves filmmaking but, ironically, is not at all cinematic. It's pure cartooning. Kumar and Matt discuss it next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.